people, my name's Nicole and today I want to talk about the upside of Unrequited by Becky Albertalli. If you don't know, Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda is one of my all-time favorite books, so I was so excited to finally get to pick up her second book. And this follows a girl named Molly who, her twin sister just got a new girlfriend, and she's a little worried because she feels like she's losing her sister to this new girl. She likes her perfectly fine, but you know, it's hard when you've been sort of the main person getting someone's attention for your entire life, and then all of a sudden you have to share them with someone else, and like, that's hard. And then she's also dealing with the fact that she's had 26 crushes and never had a boyfriend or her first kiss. But that seems like it might change soon because her sister's girlfriend has this friend who seems pretty cute and kind of perfect, and they might like be a thing. But then she starts a new job, and there's also this other guy there who is dorky and kind of weird and not the kind of guy that Molly ever expected herself to fall for. And yet, this entire review is going to be spoiler free, so don't you worry if you haven't had a chance to pick this up yet. Overall, I absolutely loved this. It took me a little bit longer to get into than Simon, but once I got into it, I could not put it down. Molly was funny and charming and just such a great main character. I felt like she went through some really good character development and relationship development with her sister, with her mom, just everything. Really well done character development. All the romances felt like they were just really well done and evolved very naturally, and it felt like there was a really good balance of the romantic relationship development and the friendship, sister, familial relationship development, which I really liked. A lot of times I feel like books tend to focus a little too heavily on the romantic side, and I loved that there was a good balance in this. This book also has really good diversity. Main character Molly is fat. That's something that it comes up a number of times in the book. It's something that it's a part of who she is, but Becky Albertalli has talked about how this is own voices for fat girls, and how Molly she's comfortable in her body. What she's not comfortable with is other people being uncomfortable with her body, and that's really where most of the conflict in relation to her weight comes from. So don't worry, this is not a fat girl loses a bunch of weight and then suddenly becomes popular story. This is good representation for underrepresented body types. Molly and her family are also Jewish. That's something that gets brought up a number of times. One of her moms is Black. Molly and her twin sister are the biological children of her other mom, her white mom, but their younger brother is the biological child of their Black mom, and that entire side of her family is Black, including, if you read Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda, Abby is Leah's cousin on that side of the family. So she pops up a number of times. Molly's sister's girlfriend is Korean American, and then there is a wide variety of sexualities. Molly's straight, her twin sister's gay, her sister's girlfriend is pansexual, one of her moms is gay, one of her moms is bisexual, and I would just like to talk about the fact that this shouldn't be like a revolutionary thing, but unfortunately it kind of is a big deal for me, and that is that, first of all, there's a bisexual character and a pansexual character in the same book, and they both use the terms. Like, that's just using the terms alone is like a big thing. Having a bisexual character or a pansexual character alone is a big thing in the same book. I have never seen that before, which is sad. But like, it feels like a lot of times people are like, well, like, you can either have bisexual representation or pansexual representation, because like, people will get them confused. And like, I get that like they can be confusing because there's a lot of overlap, but like, there wasn't any of that in here. There wasn't any biphobia or panphobia, and like, there wasn't any like weird, gross comments about like bisexuality versus pansexuality versus just being gay, and it's like, oh, it was so good and it just made me so happy. And like I said, that's not a thing that should be a big deal, but unfortunately it is, and it's just, Becky Albertalli did a really good job with all her representation. I was reading the acknowledgements, and some of the people she thanked were her sensitivity readers, and there are like 15 people on that list. So I really appreciate that she took the time to really do her research, make sure that not only was she including lots of varieties of representation, but it was also good representation. I really appreciate that. Like I said earlier, these girls are the cousins of Abby from Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda. So if you read Simon, there are a few really good cameos in there. They're not a huge big deal, and they definitely didn't like take over the book or anything. But if you have read Simon, they're a lot of fun to pick out and just enjoy. They're not anything that if you haven't read Simon, you'll like totally miss anything. It's not like you have to read Simon in order to read this. But I do want to say that if you haven't read Simon, there aren't huge spoilers for Simon, mostly just the relationship status of like one or two characters, mostly smaller characters. It doesn't like reveal who Blue is or anything. So if you haven't read Simon but you want to, don't worry, you can totally read this one first. So when it comes to the plot of this novel, I really liked that it felt like there was no antagonist. And I know a lot of times in contemporary there isn't a sort of big bad. Usually if there is, it's like some mean girl in high school or douchebag or whatever. But I liked that there wasn't even a sort of opposing force to Molly. And that doesn't mean she didn't have conflict with people, that doesn't mean she didn't get in fights with people, but when she did fight with people, it was completely understandable. You could see both sides of the story and how both people were in the right and both people were in the wrong, and it didn't feel like our hero was fighting against the villain. It felt very real because all these characters are well-rounded and they're the heroes of their own story. This is something that's really important to me in good characterization, for a character to be able to be the hero of their own story, because at the end of the day, like, everyone is their own protagonist. We're all living our own stories, and we usually don't just don't see other people's plot lines. And I feel like this book made it really clear that like everyone has their own stuff going on, and it's hard, but you have to just kind of understand that and go with it. Molly's sister Cassie is amazing, and I'm kind of in love with her. She's this amazing feminist lesbian, and I'm just like, marry me. I also wouldn't mind like marrying Mina, her girlfriend. I'll just like hop right in the middle of that. They're beautiful and wonderful and like super feminist, and it was just so exciting because there's a lot of discussion about feminism in this. It's not like preaching it, but a couple sort of minor internal conflicts that Molly has are based on the conflict between what society has sort of always taught her she should do and want, what feminism ideally says that she should do or want, and what she's actually feeling. Because she wants to be a good feminist and not care about like what boys think of her or whatever, but then also like the society that she was raised in tells her that like that's kind of the most important thing for a young girl, which is shitty. We should change that. It's a work in progress. And so it's this sort of internal conflict that is something that I think a lot of teenage girls, young adult girls go through. I know I've certainly had that internal conflict, and it's not something that's talked a lot about. I really loved the presence of Molly and Cassie's moms. They are, first of all, just really well written. I love that they felt like real people because they're book parents. Like, first of all, book parents are barely even there usually, and second of all, even when they are there, they're usually just there to like ground the main character. No, these parents were so good. They had their own issues, they had their own flaws, and they felt so real. They were present in their daughters' lives, but they still had their own lives going on outside of them and their own conflicts that came up in the book. This didn't feel like just Molly's story isolated from the rest of her family and friends' issues. Everything was interwoven, and I loved that the parents actually felt like people instead of just kind of figures to move a plot along, which is something that I often struggle with fictional parents. And then we have Reed, who's the boy who Molly works with and kind of maybe starts to have a thing with him. I thought he was such a sweetheart, and I like that he wasn't the sort of thin, cute, quirky hipster that we kind of get a lot. That's more Will, who's Cassie's girlfriend's friend, who she kind of wants to hook Molly up with. But Reed is a total nerd, and he's described as tall and kind of husky, and that's not a like romantic male lead description that we get a lot. I mean, we get the sort of nerdy in a cute way, but it's always in a sort of tall, lanky, stereotypically sexy body. And I really liked that just like Molly was an underrepresented body type, so was Reed. And there's a really good discussion of how different people find different things sexy and attractive, and just because someone's not what you see in the magazines or what one person finds attractive doesn't mean that they're not attractive to someone else. Although I will say there's this whole thing, and I've seen this in a couple different things. There's a comment about it in the 13 Reasons Why adaptation as well that's like, oh my god, they have a Lord of the Rings thing. What a nerd. And like this whole idea that like people who like wear Lord of the Rings or like Game of Thrones merch or like stay home and watch Lord of the Rings marathons or whatever are like these massive nerds who like can't get a girl and don't have a life. And I'm like, dude, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, those are some of the most successful franchises of all time. These aren't like niche, geeky, you only ever find them at Comic-Con kinds of things. These are hugely popular. Why do we keep seeing this weird, I don't want to say stigma, but like kind of stigma against them in literature and in media? It's weird. I don't understand it. But also, like, at the end of the day, I know that Becky Albertalli is a total nerd, so like I'll cut her a little bit of slack for it. One of the things that I actually realized I just forgot to mention in the representation area is that Molly is dealing with anxiety, and she's actually on medication for her anxiety. She's on Zoloft. And I know Becky Albertalli has talked about this on Twitter about how initially when she wrote the book, the anxiety felt kind of too much and like it was overpowering the rest of the stuff in the book. And so she decided to put Molly on Zoloft, which is what she's on. And so she really understands how it works, what it does to you. And I felt like that was really, really, really well done. The little bits we did see of her anxiety, I felt like they were really good representations. Mental illness is obviously something that is so different from person to person that it's hard to make like an executive like, this is good mental illness representation. But at least for me, I thought it was very accurate. And I love that there's a character who is shown to be on medication for her mental illness. I'm like, it's not a big deal. It's not this like huge, she has a mental illness, oh my god, she has to be on medication for no, it's just a part of her life and it's genuinely helpful. And she talks about how it's a helpful thing in relation to her anxiety. And I really, really, really loved that because, like I said, it's not something we see like ever. Overall, I just really, really loved this book. I love Becky Albertalli's writing oh so much. It just makes me happy. I find it impossible to not just be constantly grinning while reading her books. This is, I know, another one just like Simon that I'm gonna read all over and over and over and over again. And side note, it makes me very happy how good these two look next to each other on the shelves, because like they're like different colors, but like the texture of the spines, and like there's like this little like sort of dotty kind of like grungy almost texture and like effect on the books, and they just look really good next to each other on the shelves. And that's all I have to say about that. I appreciate it. So that's really all I have to say on Upside of Unrequited. I ended up giving this book 5 stars because clearly I loved it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. I love you, and I will see you later. Bye!